You're welcome. Thank you. I was about to give a 2-minute warning, but it looks like everybody's in their seats for the most part. Do we feel good about go ahead and get started? Nina, do you want to gavel us in today?
No, I'm going to leave that for Earl.
That's not.
I have never touched that thing. I like it that way. I think it's weird to me. All right, so if y'all are ready, we're just going to start. Are you ready for the pledge? Am I missing it? Oh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you so much. So thankfully, this is actually going to be my last chair update. So from now on, you get Gil, and I don't have a little clicky. So if you just next slide, and we can just go to the next one. We can skip that one, and I actually can't read this as well, so sorry that I'll be kind of having my back a little bit towards y'all. This is just something that we had made a recommendation about the year before. It's the education and outreach in Burke County. We had a presentation on it the meeting before last, and then we also had an update at the committee meeting, and I just want us to keep this in mind as we're doing things over the next couple of years. The last, I think, meeting that they had was in November, right before Thanksgiving, and I think they have another one coming up the end of this month. So we just want to skip to the next one. I think y'all all got this in your email, but it's the information about the oyster shells that are being used to help absorb the zinc. I don't know if there's anything that we really need to look at as far as a recommendation on it, but I think from the article and from what I was reading about it, they're going to be using this idea and kind of moving it to other areas of the site. So just something for us to think about and kind of keep in our heads as we're looking at recommendations for the upcoming year. And next slide. So I'm only going to touch on this briefly, just because I know it's not exactly in our purview, but I do want it to be something that we think about the deadlines and the penalties for mocks and how that can impact the rest of the work at the site if those fines are implemented. And if you want to go to the next one, and I think y'all can all read that a lot better than having me read it out to you. And again, mocks is something that's kind of come in and out for us on the cab. It's not in our purview, but it does impact the work that I think the Savannah River site does, and it's just something for us to be mindful of. Moving on to the next one. So this is something that I'm sure everyone has seen and kind of talked about. There is the pit production that occurs in Los Alamos, and the city of Aiken at the county council or city council meeting made a resolution to support pit production coming to the Savannah River site from Los Alamos. So there's a lot of discussion, I think, that's been going around in the news about the impact that would have to Savannah River site, the impact that would have towards Los Alamos, and what that would mean for the site if they do get that pit production. So I don't think there's anything that the CAB needs to write a recommendation on at this point, but I think it is something that, if it happens, will probably be something for us to just look at as a CAB. Moving on to the next slide. Just some things to keep in mind. The environmental, all clear. I can't read my own PowerPoint because it's far away and I didn't print it out. Oh, this is something that I saw in the news and I thought it was interesting. They just did that new environmental assessment, and it was issued, I believe it was December, which is when I did this PowerPoint, and the impact about the radiation exposure for upcoming projects. If you want to move into the next slide. The public outreach schedule is available for the 2018 tours. I know that's something Eleanor and her committee has really pushed for, and I think it's been a great success as far as getting out there and talking to people in the community about what the CAB does. So I'm sure that her and Kathy will have that schedule up for y'all to sign up. Bobby, I'm saying Kathy, I'm sorry, Bobby will have up to sign up to do the public tours. And then the next slide. This is the same slide I've had for the entire year that we've been doing CAB updates. Just some of the goals that I think are important for us to keep up with. And I think one of the main ones is to keep current about things that are happening. You know, the support team does a great job about sending out those daily emails about updates and seeing how those impact the work of the CAB and what that can mean, whether it's a recommendation or a work plan topic, but just keeping current on things that are happening. Moving on to the next slide. Our CAB member responsibilities. It's something that I know Earl and I and Larry have always thought about, and Bob over the last couple of years. I just think Larry is rotating off with us, and I know he's not. Is just to make sure that you're representing why you're here. Moving on to the last slide. There should be one more. If you clicky, just to thank you for it. And I know Earl will be thinking about where we're going to be doing our group lunch tomorrow. And he didn't know that until now, but he'll make that announcement tomorrow about where we'll have our group lunch. Thank y'all. And James, if you want to just give us our outline for the days.
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to do is go over the meeting rules with you folks. Standard rules, as we always do, we ask you to keep us on the agenda timeline, so we'll stay on topic as we move through the day. Listen to and respect other points of view. You guys always do a good job of doing that and hearing each other. Not Gil? No, he's vehemently against it at the moment, but that's okay. We'll get him turned around. Participate and ask questions for clarification. If you're confused about anything, raise your hand, let us know, pull up your question card. State your name and affiliation when speaking. That's very important for the minutes transcription so that as we move through, we know we can hear your name audibly so that we can put it in. Let's see. Please make your comments on a microphone. Please do not dominate the discussion or have side conversations. We want to make sure that we all hear each other and what we're doing at the moment. And place your cell phones in. For those of you who still have pagers, place them on silent as well. John immediately reached for his and done. Got it. Thank you. All right, so throughout the rest of the day, after we move on from here, we're going to do the agency updates. Jack Rose will have the updates for what we'll have for DOE, and then we'll move into South Carolina DHEC. We'll take a short, after that, we'll actually have a great, short but great presentation for you guys. For all of our outgoing members, we're going to recognize everybody who's been with us and has filled out their 6 years, or for those of us who have decided not to fill out the entire 6 years, Kathy, we're going to miss you. After that, we'll take a short break. We'll do the committee updates. Each committee will give us a brief acknowledgement of what they've done over the past month, where they stand, and what's coming up next. And then we'll do a draft recommendation discussion. And this is a great one. I think you guys will have a good time talking about this one today. It was a wonderful discussion in the waste management meeting itself. So when it comes to the full board, y'all are going to have a great time with it. Any questions about the meeting rules or the agenda? Nope. All right. Jack, what you got for us?
Thank you. Jack Craig, Department of Energy. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Hilton Head. And great day to be here, and happy to give you our update. First of all, congratulations. James mentioned our 6 outgoing cab members who are leaving us after this meeting. As always, your work is valuable at the Department of Energy. We understand it's a voluntary duty on behalf of you for the department. We appreciate your help and support. Congratulations to Jim Folk and our liquid waste team on the successful installation of Melter 3. We had talked at previous meetings about Melter 2 coming to the end of its life. Melter 3 was successfully reinstalled by a lot of good hard work by many people in the liquid waste program. The first actual vitrified waste pour took place at the end of December in the new melter. We completed a canister by the end of the fiscal year of the material that was held up in the old melter. Like I said, we produced 1 canister by the end of the year, and we actually produced 5 canisters and as far as the restart goes. Nina mentioned the EA. The department finalized the environmental assessment for the acceptance and disposition of spent nuclear fuel containing U.S. origin highly enriched uranium from the Federal Republic of Germany. A finding of no significant impact was issued. The decision on the acceptance of the material has not been made. This potentially the EA decision might allow SRNL to continue research and development in the disposition of the material, but that's TBD based on some discussions with the Republic of Germany and some negotiations which would have to take place on cost recovery. On our liquid waste contract, we've talked at previous meetings about the new liquid waste contract at the site. On October 11th, DOE awarded the contract for the SRS liquid waste services to Savannah River Eco Management LLC. The other bidders have filed a protest on that award with the Government Accountability Office, and that office has 100 days to make a decision on that protest. The contract transition is on hold until that protest is resolved. A lot of interest on the budget, I'm sure. As for the 2018 budget, just a little bit of background, we were under what's called a continuing resolution to provide funding to the Savannah River site. That CR ended last Friday at midnight. The government has been essentially shut down with no new appropriations since that time. We at the site had carryover funding. It varied among contracts, but we had carryover funding that would allow us to fund work through the end of January. Some of our contracts actually had work through February. So we were able to continue work with that carryover funding, both contractual work and our federal employees. Just before this meeting, I heard that the Senate had passed a new CR, which would provide funding through February 8th. Since the Senate has passed that, it has to go back to the House. They have to pass it again, and the President would sign that. From all indications, that's going to happen today. So we would have a CR through the end of the day on the 8th of February. On the 2019, we typically are scheduled to submit the President's budget to Congress in February of this year, February of every year, the budget's submitted. All of our work on that budget locally is done. Headquarters has it. It's ready to go. Whether or not this CR and uncertainty in the 2018 budget will hold that up, we're not part of that, but that could be a little delay in that. That typically is submitted in February. On the 2020 budget, We are planning and prioritizing work to create our 2020 budget. John Lopez will talk a little bit more about our priorities for the CAB, I believe, tomorrow on that. On our nuclear materials program, the H Canyon operations, H Canyon continues processing the target residue materials from Canada. The current work also focuses on replacement of one dissolver and modifying the other processes to process high-flux isotope reactor fuel in 2018. On plutonium downblend, K-Area is required to complete destructive examinations of 6 plutonium containers in 2018 as part of our ongoing surveillance program for long-term storage of plutonium. 5 of 6 of those destructive tests have been completed, and we will be now beginning our downblending program through the remainder of FY18. Just a reminder, we did plutonium downblend in all of 2017. We have one glove box in K-Area that we do the destructive tests. The liquid waste system. We did some robotic repair of the evaporator over the fall period. We believe that the robotic repair had been successful, but during the startup we found some additional leaks, different areas of the evaporator. So we're looking at some solutions to that, whether or not the evaporator can operate with those new leaks that we found, but also in parallel we are procuring a new evaporator to eventually have installed. On the salt waste processing facility, we're completing the tie-ins to SWPF from the liquid waste system, and we believe the completion of that work will be done the end of this month. On SWPF, commissioning is 66% complete as of the end of December. We have 55 of 60 system operability tests completed, along with 1 integrated system operability test. Introduction of chemicals will be into the facility is expected in March, and construction of the next generation solvent cold chemical feed facility is on schedule. For tank closure cesium removal, the factory acceptance test was put on hold. This is a process that's being constructed and put together in the state of Washington for delivery here on site. The acceptance test was put on hold due to some pre-filter performance issues. We're looking at how the contractor can resolve those performance issues and what impact it may have to the schedule. On SDU, Salt Disposal Unit number 7, site preparation work began in October. It's the second of the large volume disposal units planned to store or dispose of the remaining tank waste, low-level tank waste. On the D-ash project, all the ash from the west end of 488-1D has been excavated. The team is waiting on the last sample to declare excavation complete in that area. Chemical or mechanical completion is forecasted for the end of 2018 for the project. At SRNL, the SRNL helped the Department of Homeland Security's Domestic Nuclear Detection Office and the state of Louisiana conduct a full-scale preventive radiological and nuclear detection exercise on the Mississippi River near the port of Baton Rouge in November. And the annual ORTH Lifetime Achievement Award is the highest award given to the lab for technical excellence and leadership. Congratulations to the 2017 recipient, Tracy Ridicell. He has spent more than 30 years at the lab conducting research development for uranium, neptunium, plutonium, americium, and curium processing. As far as issues, we have one we've talked about before with respect to the H Canyon, the exhaust tunnel for the H Canyon. There was a question on the structural stability of that exhaust tunnel. Safety evaluations were conducted, and we have resumed processing in H Canyon while we do some additional structural tests which may have some impact on HB line operations. And that work is being done by SRNS with oversight of SRNL. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Are there any questions? A whole bunch of them. Dawn, I saw yours go up first, and then we're going to come over here to Susan.
Dawn Gillis, Cab. On the DASH project, you said it's be done the end of 2018. Is that fiscal year or calendar year?
I'm not sure. I'll get back to you.
Okay. I thought I saw Avery here before, but and does that mean it's totally completed, or this excavation part completed?
It's construction complete.
Construction
so,
complete. Right. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Susan Corbett, Cab. So, I might get this open or I can read it. So, on January 4th, Secretary Perry received a letter from the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board, a report that they did, where they found a number of less than adequate controls in the TSR. Can you talk to this group about that?
Sure. Yes, Jack Craig, DOE. So over the last, I would say, year, we, the department, had identified a number of safety-related issues with both SRNS and SRR with respect to their technical safety requirements. And these are requirements and documentation that must be followed for safe operations. So some of the issues had to do with training, some had to do with procedures not being as clear as they should be, and other issues. So we self-identified those, to both contractors, and this was throughout FY17. Both contractors developed action plans to address those. We accepted those and thought that if they carried out the actions, they would resolve those issues. Subsequent to that, the department got the letter from DNFSB, which had the same issues. There were no new issues. And so we believe we have an action plan to address those, and that both contractors are on their way to doing the actions necessary to resolve it.
Is that something that these parties will review at the end of a year and to see if you've made the necessary improvements or not, or
Yes.
how will that proceed?
Yeah, Jack Craig, DOE. So yes, we have specific actions outlined in their action plans. We will review those through and validate them through closure. And the Defense Board, which has 2 of their reps at Savannah River full-time, will also be involved in the validation of those actions.
Thank you.
Okay. Avery, you had a follow-up.
I did. Avery Hammett, DOE. It is fiscal year 18 for completion.
Thank you. Narendra?
Narendra Malik, Cab. I have a twofold question about 3H evaporator. We've been hearing from the SRR management that is going to be fixed, and you just mentioned that there is some leak. Number one question is, if that's a leak, are we still operating? And how we are operating, and how much additional cost is going to cost us to operate it as it is and to fix it?
So Jack Craig, the department, don't have an answer to all those yet. So we believe that the robotic repairs that were done last fall would fix it, and we would actually be back up in operation today. These were new leaks identified after we began startup after the repairs in the fall. They're still evaluating whether or not we can use it with these small leaks and maybe use it at a reduced rate. But we don't have an answer to that yet. So as far as cost and whether or not it can operate, that's still being evaluated. And in parallel with that, we're doing a new procurement to replace that evaporator. Now, we have another evaporator on site which is operational, so we do have the ability to run one evaporator that is still operational.
Keep in mind, Narendra, tomorrow, Tom Foster from SRR is going to be giving a presentation on the status of the liquid waste program. I just happen to know that there's a few slides on 3H in there, so
yeah,
hold on to that
that's a
question,
good
bring
point.
it
Tom
back.
knows a lot more about evaporators than I do.
So, Mr. Lyon, I believe I saw your card go up next.
My question has to do with something you didn't directly address, but it was on the board when we first came in, and that's MOX. And my interest in this comes from actually handling the weapons themselves. I always wondered how in the devil we were going to decommission 17,000 nuclear devices. And on the MOX project, Fast Facts, there's obvious benefit to be derived from a completed MOX project producing the fuel pellets that would be used in commercial electric generation. However, I don't understand how Department of Energy came into an agreement that would give South Carolina $1 million a day for any gap in the completion date, the projected completion date. That's a mystery to me, knowing that nuclear projects almost never complete on time. And at this point, the state of South Carolina is probably, if they actually were to get what they're getting, want to get, going to rake in more than the actual cost of constructing the MOX facility. And number two, what are the big issues? Again, I'm sure I've heard these before, that have held up construction on MOX, and how much of that would fall into something like force majeure beyond your control?
It's Jack Craig with the department. Very, very good, relevant questions, although I'm not the person to answer those. The MOX project's being run by the NNSA. That's not part of our purview within at least my responsibilities at the site. The agreement, as I understand it, with the state of South Carolina came out of a 2003 requirement that was negotiated or directed much before my time and really outside the responsibilities of EM. So we can take your questions. I can make sure they go to the right people on site, but unfortunately can't answer those today.
Thank you.
Dave Bavakis, CAB. I understand there was some legislation enacted on drones. Will that change the way that you monitor those from how things have been in the past?
So I've read the same thing. There is proposed and may have already passed some prohibitions about drones flying over the Savannah River site. We've not gotten anything in writing on that, but I think the department is trying to implement this across the department at our sites. Unfortunately, it's not going to really change what we do with respect to drones. Unfortunately, at least what we experienced to date is the drones that we have identified, we've never found who was operating the drones. So even if you had a prohibition that you could enforce, we never had somebody to enforce it with because we could never find who was operating them. So our response will probably be the exact same that we're doing today. We identify them, we report them, we try to find out who's flying them, but we've been unsuccessful up to this point.
Any others? Not today. You're all letting them off light? Okay. DHEC?
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Fulmer. I'm with the Department of Health and Environmental Control. I'm filling in for Shelley Wilson today. Just a few updates for you. A couple of documents that will be coming out. The fifth five-year remedy review report for Savannah River Site operable units with engineered cover systems is currently circulating for signatures between the three parties. DOE has signed it and sent it to South Carolina DHEC. We will be signing it, sending it to EPA shortly. Once all of those signatures are obtained, that document will be published and available for public review. There will be another fifth five-year remedy review report for operable units with geosynthetic or stabilization and solidification remedies that will be coming out shortly. It's not quite ready yet for signatures, so it should be coming out probably in the March or April timeframe, and it will also be available for public review. Last week, DHEC participated in the Energy Communities Alliance meeting about possible changes in the high-level waste definition to allow other management options. We participated along with DOE and other states. We believe some adjustment to the definition may be appropriate to allow for more cost-effective, technically justified options as long as the state has a strong voice in the decision process. As far as violations, DHEC issued 2 notices of violations to SRS. One was for asbestos, and one was for wastewater, stormwater discharges. That was a fecal coliform issue. Both were final actions with no further follow-up. Any questions?
Dawn's got a hair trigger on the question card today.
Dawn Gillis, Cab, it's not necessarily a question for you, but is EPA not here today because of the shutdown?
And that we could probably answer.
Oh.
That's something that we would have to ask them.
Oh, so they just didn't show up?
I wouldn't say that. No, that would not be my official answer, no. Yes, EPA is more than likely affected by the lapse in appropriations, and I know that if they could be here today, they would want to be.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you have an environmental justice meeting on Thursday that they canceled from? So,
No.
yeah.
So it probably is a shutdown issue.
Yep. All right. Earl?
Earl Shepherd, Cab. Exactly, are you eligible to say what was the fecal count and what did they contribute it to? Operator error, sampling?
I don't have that information, but we can get it for you.
Okay. Anyone else? All of y'all have seen the sunny day on the beach outside and said, "The heck with this, huh?" It's all right. We'll get you into it. There's no more further questions for DHEC. Avery? Avery's coming up. She's got things. Probably not a question for DHEC, but.
Sorry, Avery Hammett, DOE. The count at discharge or at outfall LO7A was 1,600 colonies per 100 milliliters. So the maximum allowed, I think, is 400. So that answers. Correct.
All right. So if that's it, how about we recognize our outgoing members right now? What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. Jack Craig and Terry Spears to come up, and they'll be presenting certificates and letters to everyone outgoing. I'm going to call you all up one at a time. I'm going to ask you to come around, and I know that, Bob, it seems absurd, but we're going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you to come around the back and come down over where Dina is. I know it's a shorter trip this way, but let's just start the precedent of everybody going the same direction. So, Bob, if you'll go ahead and come up, and we'll start with you. Yeah, we're going to call you all up one at a time, and you're going to have to stand in front of people. You know, it's going to be awesome. No, you're fine. Count. All right. Yeah. Sorry.
So I want to thank Bob. Bob has been a chair of the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee during his 6 years here, and valued member of our board. Really thank you for your service. Thanks. Get a picture here.
We're going to do a group picture after we get everybody up here. So, Kathy, you're next.
So Kathy, among other things, served as the CAB Vice Chair for the Facility Disposition and Site Remediation Committee and the CAB Vice Chair of the Administration and Outreach Committee. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Thanks. Bill Roten. Bill was a former chair of the Facilities and Disposition and Site Remediation Committee during his 6-year service. Congratulations. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Ed, if you come up.
Ed Sturkin. Ed was a member of the Facilities Disposition and Site Remediation Committee. Congratulations and thanks, Ed. Good to see you, man. Earl Shepard. So Earl served as the CAB chair of the Waste Management Committee and the CAB vice chair of the entire committee. And I think he served on about every other committee we've had here, so thanks. Also have a little plaque for Ed here as his vice chair. Thanks. And Nina. Nina served as the vice chair of the CAB and the CAB chair, and served on almost every committee in the CAB also. So thank you for your service. Right. Now you get to hold this. Yep. Come on over.
So I know that we're running a little bit ahead of time, but let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break now. We'll come back after this. We'll give you a chance to absorb your recognition. Come back in 10 minutes, and we'll go through the committee updates, okay? 10 minutes. Close, we're already sitting down. It's all the troublemakers like Earl. He's not listening. We'll let a few more people take their seats. So let's go ahead and move into the committee update portions. This is where each committee is going to inform the full board on what they've been working on in the past couple months since you've last met in November. Up first, we're going to have Eleanor, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize to Eleanor. Normally, we give a good amount of handouts to the chairs. In this case, we didn't get Eleanor stuff, so if she seems a little bit like she's thinking of things off the top of her head, it's because she's thinking of things off the top of her head, and we didn't get our notes to her in time for this one. So with that, Eleanor.
Eleanor Hopson, SRS, CAB, Administrative and Outreach Committee Chair. Good afternoon. Welcome to Hilton Head, South Carolina. We will vote on CAB chairs, committee chairpersons tomorrow. And we will also ask you not to forget membership. As you have just witnessed, we have outgoing members, therefore we need new members for the CAB. We have information on the back table, and we are always seeking new members. The membership applications are also on the website at cab.srs.gov. The Board Beat magazine is available, and there are copies at your places on the tables. If you would like more information about the CAB, please visit the website. The A&O committee will meet after this meeting this afternoon at 5 o'clock. All A&O committee members, please attend the meeting. I know that the beach is beckoning for you, and we will take a few minutes to discuss a few important items. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eleanor. So alphabetically, Dawn, Facilities Disposition.
Dawn Gillis, Chair of the Facilities Disposition and Remediation Committee, Site Remediation. Right now we have no open recommendations and no pending recommendations. So, and as far as anything going, we're watching the DASH area, and I don't have anything else. Does any of my deputy have anything to add? No, she doesn't. Okay, and we have no draft recommendations at this particular point, so thank you.
Okay. And I forgot to ask, are there any questions for A&O or FDSR? All right. Larry, you want to update them on nuclear materials?
Thank you, James. I'm Larry Powell, Chair of the Nuclear Materials Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to Hilton Head. It was mighty nice today to have a 5-minute commute to the meeting rather than a 4-hour commute. So, but welcome everybody here. We have 3 open recommendations that I think we should close. Number 334, number 348, number 349. And I'd like to move to close those if anybody, unless somebody has a reason to leave those open.
Save that portion for our vote tomorrow. And I don't remember, did you guys talk about that in the committee meeting, closing those?
We talked about, but we didn't do anything about it.
But y'all didn't do anything about it? Can we let them vote tomorrow if they want to talk about it today? Okay, so y'all have talked substantively about it. Do you want to address a little bit for the board why you want to close them, or do you want to do that tomorrow?
We can do that tomorrow.
Let's do that tomorrow.
Okay.
We'll summarize for everybody why the committee wants to close those, and we can make that part of our voting tomorrow, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Awesome.
Also, number 350, the renowned German spent nuclear fuel. I guess we can talk about that more tomorrow as well, but I've got some questions and some thoughts on that I'd like to bring out now so people can be thinking about them between now and tomorrow. In conjunction with all this talk about the spent nuclear fuel, there's been a lot of talk about Atoms for Peace. And I'd just like to reiterate that Atoms for Peace was a speech given by Dwight Eisenhower to the General Assembly of the United Nations. It was a speech. It was not a treaty. It was not even an agreement. And it didn't obligate the U.S. to do anything. It just suggested that an international atomic energy agency be established. And that agency would be responsible for impounding, storage, and protection of the contributed fissionable and other materials. That's pretty much all it really was, and everybody's been alluding to it as if it were a treaty or something that obligated the United States to do something. And it really, from what I can read, was not. Another thing I wanted to bring up, I found a document from the General Accounting Office that was written in 1984 discussing return of spent nuclear fuel to the United States, and it defined quite a number of things that the United States was responsible for and not responsible for. And basically what it's saying is that we've talked about the ownership chain of materials from other countries. In other words, when we've gotten an environmental assessment, I think that goes all the way from Germany to the United States, when in fact Germany will retain possession of this spent nuclear fuel until it's turned over to DOE at the port in the United States. So as far as I can see from what this General Accounting Office statement says, we're not responsible for getting it here. It's just we take responsibility once it gets here. And also there's been some talk about how generous Germany is with paying for this research and paying for the decommissioning of the materials. That is an obligation as part of the as part of what was supposed to be done. They are obligated to make these payments. It's not something that they've just offered to do. The final thing that I've discovered here is, if I can find it, I've got an NNSA report from the year 2008, and I'm not real sure how to take this. It says in this NNSA report that 4 shipments returned a total of almost 115 pounds of HEU spent fuel and eliminated all U.S. origin HEU eligible for return from 4 additional countries: Argentina, Portugal, Romania, and Germany. This was in 2008, and I don't really understand if at that time all eligible spent nuclear fuel came back from Germany. I don't understand where this fuel came from that we're expecting to come back in now. So those are just the points that I wanted to bring up, and maybe let everybody think about them, do a little homework on them, and maybe we can talk about them tomorrow or at a later date. Gil, did you have a draft recommendation that is a nuclear materials recommendation?
It's a waste management.
Waste management, okay. Then that's all I have for now, James. Thank you.
Okay. We do have a little bit of time today, so are there any questions for nuclear materials for Larry? Let's go, Gil.
Larry, I'm confused because I've done some research on Atoms for Peace too, and I was under the impression that there was an agreement. I don't know if I'm going to call it a treaty or what have you, but I don't have that. I mean, it's been months, 6 months to a year since I did the research, so I apologize. I don't have it readily available. But I was one of the. I mean, there was a 50-year time frame put into it, and I'm even kind of confused that you said that it wasn't a treaty, but then there was an obligation by Germany to pay. So that kind of seemed a little backwards. So I guess that's a question.
Let's do this, folks. Yeah. Before you go too far down this road, let's make sure that we're talking about the committee's thoughts and ideas as related to the DOE response, because that's what matters at this point. You've passed the rec, and we've heard all these arguments and discussion points before related to, Atoms for Peace and what is and is not required. We're there. You've got it. DOE's responded to it. So let's talk about the response itself if we're going to have this discussion. Is that fair? Because I don't think we really want to go down all these same roads again.
Well, James, I agree with you. But there was some reference to the Atoms for Peace in Jack's reply.
Okay.
So that's the only reason I brought that up.
I understand that. Okay.
Okay.
And Gil, I've got the speech here. I'd be happy to give this to you.
Yeah, we'll talk. We can talk about it later. I mean,
all right.
We won't fight.
We'll debate. We'll just debate. Don Gillis, Cab. The one thing that I wanted to say about how much Germany's, and I frankly speaking have not found the response yet. I was just looking for it. Couldn't figure out where it came in yet. But as far as how much Germany, any high-income country is required to pay is an amount of money per kilogram of material, or gram. I don't remember exactly what the unit is, but that's what they're required to pay, and that is never been intended to be full cost recovery. And what Germany is offering now is all the research and all the other things which would be. And I'm not sure exactly how you define full cost recovery when you're talking about the canyon and minimum cost to maintain the canyon and that type of thing. And I'm sure that's the kind of things that are being negotiated now. But what Germany is paying is, I am having an educated guess here, and I want to see a shake of heads here, yay or nay, that it's more than that required payment from any high-income country that we get fuel back from.
All right.
Don, I don't know exactly which contract this is speaking of, but it's with enough time I could find it. But it says
they do pay for transport. Yes.
It says pursuant to the terms of the contract, the countries are required to transport the fuel to a DOE reprocessing facility and to reimburse the United States for the reprocessing and disposal cost.
What document is this?
This came from the General Accounting Office.
What was the date of that document?
1984.
84. So I don't know what's changed since 1984 on that either. But while I was the spent fuel program manager, and I'm sure that Maxine can answer some of that too. It has been a cost per kilogram that came in, and depending on whether it was low income, or I can't say low income, other than high income versus high income countries, there was a cost per kilogram, not a total full cost recovery. Are we right with that, Maxine?
Yes, you're pretty close, Don. So there's a Federal Register notice that sets the fees for the high-income countries, and that, I believe, was in January of 2012, and it sets it per kilogram based on the HEU amount of material in the fuel. And that's not a full cost recovery. That's just a payment to the U.S. for part of that fuel storage and disposition. It's not full cost recovery. And that the material that's coming back is coming back through the NNSA return program. So NNSA is the one that establishes the contract with the foreign country. And you're right, the foreign country, if they're high-income countries, responsible for all the transportation costs to get it to the site. Once it gets to the site, then it's an EM responsibility, and that's where we take over for it. I think the difference between the German fuel that you're referencing that was all eliminated with the other three countries and this German graphite fuel is that it wasn't eligible for return because we didn't have a disposition path for it. And that's why EM took on the project when they asked the department for help and how would you disposition this graphite fuel. And being that it was U.S. origin material, that's why EM was willing to help them, but they're having to pay for that research. So there's a slight difference between the two. The eligible word is the very important in those sentences.
Thank you, Maxine.
You're welcome.
So it sounds like maybe we're not quite ready to have a response discussion yet. Not everybody's had a chance to read it, or not everybody's taken the opportunity. And there's some other further research that a few folks wants to do. So let's shelve this for now. Next committee meeting is going to be awesome, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. So if there's no more questions for nuclear materials, quick scan in the room. All right. Bob, how about you update us on strategic and legacy management?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bob Dorr. I am the chair of the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. And James, do we have slides or for the committee or? Oh. Okay. Well, again, I'd like to welcome everyone to Hilton Head, and I hope you have a nice time here. Our Strategic and Legacy Management Committee, our committee members are myself as the chair. Currently, the vice chair is open position. Other committee members include Gil Allensworth, Rose Dobson-Elliott, Dan Kaminsky, Jim Lyon, Earl Shepard, Nina Spinelli, David Vivakis, and Mary Weber. Now, we have, let's see, we've got open recommendations. From our last committee meeting, we discussed it was a recommendation that we received a response from DOE. It was recommendation 338. And there was David Hoyle, who was a member of our committee, had asked that if we could revisit recommendation 338 in terms of it was the community involvement plan. And exactly David's issue was how the DOE was going to gather information from the community. It was concerning information that he was looking for from the EPA and so forth. But anyway, the committee, in David's absence, we did review 338 again. We reviewed the specific response from DOE in this recommendation in regards to how information was going to be gathered by EPA from the community. And the committee chose to close recommendation 338. We felt the response from DOE was sufficient. Okay. We have another open recommendation. That is recommendation 346, which is drone spotting over SRS. Now, we didn't discuss that recommendation at our committee meeting, but then the day after the committee had its meeting, we received a DOE response. I've got it time-stamped here, December 13th, 2017. So there's a DOE response to open recommendation 346. It has not been discussed in the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee yet. We'll have a new chair for this committee in 2018, and that'll be something that needs to be discussed, I believe, in March would be the next, April. April will be the next committee meeting. So 346, DOE has responded. We have not, the committee has not discussed this, so we're not going to bring this up here today to the full board, but that would be something for the agenda for the April meeting. Also during the committee meeting, we had a point of contact status update by Zach Todd, and as usual, that's part of a continuing status update from a previous recommendation that our committee gets. So we listened to the status update, and I believe, let's see, we discussed, we had some discussion from our presentation about EM performance metrics. There were some suggestions within the committee that we could expand the metrics, do some tracking on the metrics, and so forth. So DOE was interested in listening, and Zach Todd in particular took some notes. So I'm sure when the action plan is developed for 2018, that presentation on EM performance metrics will be there again, and we'll see if there's any change or expansion of the information in regards to the metrics. And then we briefly discussed continuous improvement. It was a presentation that we had in November. There wasn't much discussion about it, and no recommendations came out of it. So at this point, we have no new recommendations from this committee. There is a recommendation that was written 351, which is a pending recommendation. We're still waiting for a response from DOE on 351, which is the Savannah River National Lab funding. So the new chair of this committee will take up those issues, 351 and the 346 response. Is anybody from our committee like to bring anything else up that we discussed? Okay. Is there any questions from the rest of the board in regards to the Strategic Legacy Management Committee? Okay. Well, I guess that's my last report. Thank you, DOE, for the pleasure of serving on the board for the last 6 years. It's been a lot of fun. Jack, thank you as the plant manager. Mike Michelanis, thank you as DDFO. I appreciate it very much. Zach Todd's not here today, but Zach's been...
Zach's there.
Oh, Zach, great. Oh, yeah, you got some fuzz on there. That's great. Zach, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you the last few years, too. And John Lopez as well with all the funding issues. I want to thank you very much. So, goodbye.
Thanks, Bob. I wouldn't clarify, Don, 350 is online, so if you want to find the response to that. Yeah, I know that I sent it out, and I'm pretty sure it was before Christmas, but it is on the website. Don't check it now, though. You have to wait, because we're going to make sure that we all listen to Gil's update for the Waste Management Committee. Okay?
Oh, she can
check.
No. Good afternoon, Gil Allensworth with the CAB, Waste Management Chair. Welcome everybody to Hilton Head. We haven't heard that a few times today. You know, Larry, you had a 10-minute drive. I had a 2-hour and 55-minute drive, so we swapped. And Render had 3 hours, I just found out. But before I get into the Waste Management Committee update, Bob, I think I'm very happy that I got the opportunity for this update to come after yours. I want to thank James, DeLisa, whoever, the first year that I served on the CAB, I got sat between Bob and Earl. And if it wasn't for those two guys and them helping me understand what we were going over with just things I just didn't even begin to understand. And it was nice. I had Bob to one side and I had Earl to the other, and they would explain the two things and really help me. If anyone served with Harold as the CAB chair, you know it drove him up a wall. But those two guys helped me so much. So I want to make a special thank you to everyone that's coming off the CAB, and thank you for everything you've done. But specifically, no disrespect to anybody else, but thank you so much to Earl, and thank you so much to Bob, because you guys really, really have helped me a lot. So thank you. As far as waste management, we have some recommendation updates. We have an open recommendation. We have not received a response from Department of Energy yet on recommendation 336, waste management milestones. We will discuss that when we receive that. But we do have some pending recommendations. DOE has responded, but we haven't had the opportunity to meet as a committee.
It's reversed. If it's open, you have a response. If it's pending, you don't have a response.
I'm just reading what it says. Okay. Well, anyway,
but you do have 336.
Yeah,
I promise you.
We have it, but we're not ready to present it to the full board as of yet. that will be the next waste management chair. And since Don's not paying attention, we can say a lot of funny things about her right now. We're not, of course. We do have a open recommendation that we will be discussing here a little bit later in the agenda. And we'll discuss that further when that comes up. But again, I thank you all for allowing me to serve as the waste management chair, and I look forward to the next chairman.
All right. Any questions for the Waste Management Committee? Nope. Tom, will you update everybody on the budget, pension, and scope?
So, this is Tom French with the CAB. I'm the chairman of the Balance in the Budget and the Mission Scope. And I have the best committee because we're only going to have one recommendation, and then we're done. We put us out of business. So on this committee is Gil Allensworth, Bob Dewar, Dan Kaminsky, Earl Shepard, Nina Spinelli, Joyce Underwood, and Bobby Williams. And we have had 2 meetings so far. The first meeting, we had Jim Barry come in and explain to us, he's the chief financial guy for SRS, and he explained to us how the pension is managed. Who manages the funds, who's on the board over the funds, how does DOE provide funds to the contractor to put in the fund. And it was fascinating. It's recorded, and I'd recommend that everybody go watch this video. It's on the YouTube channel or on the CAB website. But Jim spent probably an hour and 10 or 15 minutes doing nothing but going through every element of the pension. It was probably the most informative thing I've done. The second thing we had was John come in, and John explains to us what happens if the site has to pay the pension. And I tell you, John is very convincing because I was pretty scared after I heard what this really means. It's a big impact. It's a big impact on the site. It's a big impact on the mission. And it's a big impact on the community. And so John was giving potential numbers of finances cut to the community, and Rick McLeod was there from the community reuse, and he said this is what this means to surrounding communities, how many hundreds of millions of dollars impact it is. So it's a huge impact. So our committee is now as educated as I think we can be in the short term. And so what we're going to do, our next meeting is we're going to start whiteboarding the potential recommendations and then doing a pro and con analysis. And I think that'll set us up to have a recommendation ready by our May deadline.
Are there any questions or follow-up comments for this committee? No? Gil?
Tom, what are we going to do about membership on the committee? Because I know we have one person going off, or 2 people going off, and are we going to replace them?
Yeah, I think we need to represent those 2 committees.
Okay. And also, just for cleaning things up, I'm going to stay on the committee, but I'm going to step away as vice chair after tomorrow because of my new role with the CAB.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So what we'll do, Gil, is after the new committee chairs are elected, then we'll ask those 2 committees if they want to recommend somebody or they themselves sit on this committee.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Any questions about that? No? All right. So with all of those taken care of, the next thing we have is this draft recommendation from the Waste Management Committee. Y'all are flying through today. We're almost at the end. Nina's ready. So, Chelsea, if you could pull up that draft, and then Gil, I believe you're going to take over the recommendation manager duties for this one?
I am.
Okay.
Gil Allens with CAB. Unfortunately, David Hoyle had to resign as a member of the CAB, and this was his recommendation. It's investigate feasibility of reclassifying certain high-level waste to enable acceleration of disposal and reduction of costs. As most of us around this table know, David has a knowledge that is far-reaching and much further along than mine. So as I read this, trust me, I don't understand everything, but David does. It's funny, just a little side, it's funny, David and I definitely argued on recommendations over the years. This is not one of them. I wholeheartedly agree with this recommendation. So unfortunately, I'm not going to give you a synopsis. I'm just going to read it. It's going to be really boring. It's going to be really dry. But you'll understand as we get into it. I can't really explain it that well, but I'll read it. Glass waste melter number 2 recently reached the end of functional use within the Defense Waste Processing Facility, necessitating its replacement and storage pending disposal in a future permanent geological repository for high-level waste. As no such repository currently exists, the retired melters must be safely stored and guarded at SRS for many decades. The melters are currently designated as HLW merely because of the source of the waste that secondarily contaminates them and may not be based on the actual risk posed to workers at SRS, to the environment, and the nearby public. HLW disposition in a deep geological repository is highly uncertain because none has been established for our nation. HLW repository is extraordinarily expensive. An estimated $4.5 billion has already been expended at Yucca Mountain, plus an estimated $29 billion liability has been incurred in McBride 2017. If the used melters could be disposed of safely as either low-level waste or transuranic waste, the schedule and cost of disposal could be greatly reduced. Further, this principle of disposing waste based on its risk could potentially be extended to some of the vitrified HLW canisters produced by DWPF. Many of the canisters currently stored in the temporary SRS glass waste storage buildings contain vitrified sludge containing low enough concentrations of radionuclides such that a significant proportion of canisters may be able to be reclassified as true waste or LLW. Discussion. Disposing of the retired DWPF melters and canisters as other than HLW based on actual risk could result in an enormous reduction in HLW repository disposal costs and a large increase in the certainty that the future disposition of these wastes could be achieved safely and protective of human health, worker safety, and the environment. Radioactivity in the melters and in some poured canisters may contain less transuranic radioactivity than the highest loadings of some of the most radioactive transuranic waste already sent from SRS to be buried inside the DOE Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, WIP, in New Mexico. Our recommendation. The SRS Citizen Advisory Board recommends the DOE investigate the feasibility of reclassifying the used DWPF melters in some portion of HLW canisters as true waste or LLW to expedite disposal, reduce costs, and to free up storage space in the temporary GWSBs. That's it.
Okay, so we'll go into some discussion, debate of this recommendation. Susan, I believe I saw your card first. Not ready yet?
Stuff and not
Let's go to Jim.
room.
No?
No.
Okay, we'll get you.
I have too much stuff. Susan Corbett, CAB. Well, Gil, David and I usually agreed on everything, but this is the one thing we disagreed on.
This is just funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's bitter irony, just bitter irony. It's bitter. This is a lot of speculation here, and I just could never begin to vote for this because there's just not enough information. There's a whole lot of may this, may that, may this, may that. I mean, yeah, I guess all we're doing is calling for an analysis, but just a lot of vagueness here that I just don't. It may be based on actual risk. The other thing, too, is that I feel like one of the things that is actually going to force the government to create these deep geologic repositories is if we're all holding a bunch of, if we all start just dumping it in our backyard, it's like, well, the heat's off here. We don't have to do it. There's not as much pressure. If we all have a lot of nasty stuff that needs to go into a deep geologic repository, then there may be more motivation to get it built. So I'm a little concerned about that as well. But I'm concerned about if it was reclassified low level, where is it going to go? Is it going to stay here? Is it going to go? Where is it going to go? I just think there's a lot of. I would want to see a radiological analysis of this melter to see what it is contaminated with. What is the half-life of these isotopes? What kind are they? What do they decay into? I would want to see all of that before I started. I mean, I guess that's what an analysis by the DOE would do, is provide that information to us, and then we could. But I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this, and I don't. I don't want us to start reclassifying stuff that's going to end up staying here, you know, because it doesn't have anywhere to go, and then we reclassified it as something less than what it really is. And it's deadly for long, long, long periods of time in an area that's not suited for long-term waste disposal. So I have a lot of questions about this.
Jim, I believe you were next.
Jim Lyon. I think the issue is worthy of bringing up, but I can foresee that reclassification and then referring this material into the treatment processes you're talking about and storage would call for brand new capital expenditures, a whole new study on process and so forth. I think that in the end, it may be that it's better just to hold out for someday the Navajos and the Utes giving up and taking in the stuff in Yucca Mountain. But that's my opinion. We have quite enough to handle here. Now, thank you.
Narendra, you were next.
Narendra Malik, CAB. I think this is a very good recommendation. If we go back 10, 15 years ago, the Senate passed a resolution to classify some of the SRS waste under Section 3116. I'm not sure the exact number, but it's close to that. And I think it can be done for that. And historically, through the lab analysis, we know that the waste contents in the glass waste are not very high radioactive or nuclear. They do have true waste in it, and if it's classified as true waste, it'll be much safer to send it to WIP as compared to let it sit on the ground in SRS.
So we'll do Dawn and then Joyce.
Dawn Gillis, CAB. I'm with Gil in that I disagree with a lot of what David used to say, but I totally agree with this one. The first is that the recommendation is asking for a feasibility study, not asking to actually change everything right now. And changing this stuff is like pushing a snowball uphill. It would take quite a while to do it, and a lot of things can change in the process of doing that. However, the likelihood of a deep geologic repository other than WIP in our lifetimes is pretty short, pretty small, but some of this stuff could easily be safely stored in WIP technically. So it's just a matter of just a minor matter of getting the law changed. That's why I'm saying it's pushing that snowball uphill. But I think it is a very good thing to look at, because this, I mean, and I don't see this, I'm just, talking off the top now. I don't see any of this stuff ever being designated as low level, which would give it an opportunity to stay here, or I should say an option to stay here. But there are other low level places that could take it if it was designated low level. But it's glass. I mean, this glass is like pretty impermeable. But there are other places in the country that would take it as a low level. But, to me, WIP is a very feasible option technically. So I think this is a great thing to do, to look at the feasibility of this.
All right, thanks, Don. Joyce?
Joyce Underwood, CAB. I have two questions. Number one, is there any way to ballpark right now what the cost of the investigation would be? Just very expensive, not expensive?
No one wants to hazard a guess at
Those
that.
Those are relative terms.
Want to pitch you? Okay, so moot point. My second question is for the naysayers, I guess. So it's like open to anybody to answer. If we were to make it just for the melters and not some portion of high-level waste canisters, because that's really vague. If it was just the melters, would you guys be more amenable? No? I can't go there? Okay, sorry. I didn't.
I believe it was Tom, and then Bob, and then Dan, and we'll come back to folks who put their cards back up.
This is Tom French for the cab. I agree with Susan. I think that we're going to have a lot more information up front. But the thing that we ought to put in the recommendation is the infrastructure. There's no way in the world that you can ship the glass canisters today because we don't have a transport cask. And that takes years to build and certify. And shipping a melter, having any kind of cask for the melter would be almost impossible. And you're going to have to change the head end at whip so that it can deal with some different shapes. Right now it's a big platform, everything's set up to come in and slides in. They drop it straight down and take it straight off. So if you change those shapes, they have to retool that whole lowering mechanism, and it's a half-mile drop into the mine. So anyway, I think that should be included, the infrastructure part.
Bob?
Thank you. Bob Dorr, cab. You know, I'm kind of interested, Gil, with this recommendation from your committee. It was actually discussed by the committee. Your committee felt that this recommendation should move forward.
Correct.
So obviously some of these issues that are being brought up today must have been addressed in that committee meeting. And plus, DOE's had an opportunity in the draft mode to kind of review this recommendation. So DOE's not saying this is a recommendation that has no merit or makes no sense. I think that's fair to say. Is it, Gil, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. As far as reference material, I noted in the back of the recommendation that the recommendation manager, David Hoyle, he did reference a number of different studies and informational points. So I don't know if the Waste Management Committee had time to review any of this reference material before you recommended this recommendation to the full board.
Bob, we did not go through the reference material.
Okay.
We allowed David to present as he would, and quite honestly, as the chair, I trusted David in his research.
Okay. And then final point I'd just like to make, I tend to agree with what Dawn had to say. The recommendation essentially is that we're asking for DOE to do a feasibility study. And so that there's no commitment to doing this other than, you know, there is some cost savings, some better utilization of plant assets if this could be done, but it can't be done without a feasibility study. So I'm with Dawn in terms of the point that she made earlier. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dan Kaninsky, Cap. I also agree the potential cost savings are relevant and certainly would help the EM mission overall. It would also provide an excellent tool if the feasibility study came back that they could reclassify some of this waste, as it offers what Bob just referred to. It's a proportionate response. Deep geological permanent repository versus a WIP type facility. Two different animals. One may never exist, and one's a very rare species indeed. That being said, a couple things to consider too. I believe the infrastructure would be part of the feasibility study regardless of whether we make specific note of it or not. The melter itself, I would suspect, would not fit in the envelope to get it into WIP. So either it would be some other low-level waste site, or we would have to demolish it in some way, cut it up. And I don't necessarily feel that's a great thing for them to be focusing at this point. I think we should just look at the general idea of reclassification to low-level waste.
A few other people had their cards up first, but before we get to people who have already had a chance, Bob, your card went up just a minute ago. I want to go ahead and let you go, and then we'll start grabbing folks who have spoken, okay?
Okay. Robert Smith, CAB. General comment about the recommendation. I think, to recommend that a feasibility study be done, to me, seems like a reasonable request. It doesn't really throw any money at anything other than letting DOE have the recommendation to do the feasibility study. My question is more directed toward the DOE in terms of how did they arrive at the HLW designation to begin with, and do they not, within their purview and due diligence responsibility, look at these things a little bit further than just saying, okay, it's HLW, and look at alternative ways of disposal of materials and their respective costs?
Don, I think you're the best person to answer that.
I wasn't thinking about it in the answering standpoint.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, great. No, I take that back. Jim's the best person to answer that.
Well,
Thank you.
Maybe second best, but anyway, what you're really going back to, and I think what your focus of your recommendation is to recognize right now you have a source-based definition for high-level waste, right? And that high-level waste definition is because it was processed from spent nuclear fuel. So that's the connection you have here. And what your recommendation, I believe, is really trying to do is get away from that specific definition back into a risk-based definition that says, for the quantity of material, for the curies I have in this material, is it low enough that it could be disposed of through some other means? So that's really what you're getting back to. It's not a case of us at this point having the opportunity, back to specifically on the question, of being able to reclassify this right now, because it is a law. It is in by direction it says this is now high-level waste. So that's really what you're doing. I think even Susan referred to it earlier. There are some activities going on also now within Congress and other places of approaching finding a redefinition for high-level waste as well. So, there's several different efforts going on. You talked a little bit about some of the costs. We've done some very preliminary looks, and I have some, again, I phone a friend in the audience here if I need that, but there's about 2,300 or so canisters that we've looked at before that we believe are currently in storage that would probably meet a true definition if we didn't have to worry about, it's by definition high-level waste, right? So that would be about the amount of material we could move out of here from a canister perspective. It would take some time, based on somebody's question about a shipping container. We do believe there is a container out there that the canisters would fit in. Now, as you state, the NRC would still have to go back through and requalify that. We would also have to go back in and develop some infrastructure to be able to load those canisters that we don't currently have. So there's a series of activities. Certainly from a feasibility perspective, I think we could take on those kind of questions as far as could this, if the definition were changed to something else, what would it mean to us? So from that perspective, we could answer some of those questions. Again, back in the specifics of the other legal activities that are already going on beyond our control.
Jack? Well, if you want to wait till then, we'll do Jim.
I appreciate the last speaker's insight there. Again, the initial question is it possible to reclassify this? And then once that's answered, yes or no, what's involved in reclassification? And then what's involved in the change in process? And how much is it going to cost? And is it going to add to the work? Is it possible to add to the workload here with present-day funding, or is more money needed to be forthcoming? And of course, paying South Carolina $1 billion for not doing something that might interrupt that. But we'll see. It is worth asking the question, and asking in such a manner that they tell you yes, and this is why yes, or no. These are the considerations we have to take into account, and do it or not do it. Thank you.
Narendra Malik, CAB. I think my answer is twofold. First, feasibility studies. Of course, it will be conducted before any project is taken over. It will be either conducted through the NEPA process, EIS or EA. And secondly, for the transportation, if I understand correctly, in mid-90s, there was some design going on for transporting the melted to Yucca Mountains. I think that study can be pulled back if it's still available, and the new container can be redesigned and shipped to WIP.
Okay. Don?
Dawn Gillis, cab. As far as the transport's concerned as well, it doesn't matter whether we have to ship to WIP or to a low-level place or to Yucca Mountain. It has to be shipped. So, the sooner we can find a place to ship it to, if we can ship it to to WIP sooner, it is a kind of a long lead item qualifying transportation, but if I didn't realize there was a cask out there that might be able to carry it. Regardless of what we do, we have to get transportation for it. So, to me, the sooner we can do that, the better off we are to get it off our site. As far as WIP is concerned and being able to accept different configurations of canisters or whatever, they have a capability to handle remote handled packages already. I see Larry's up there going to answer some other questions, but WIP has been able to be more flexible over the years to be able to, especially when you've got a large number of something coming in, that they can change things. So that's just a technical thing. I know there's politics behind it too, but there's politics behind everything these days. But from a technical standpoint, I'm comfortable they'd be able to figure that out. So those are the two things. But we're still only asking for feasibility. So,
Gil, you want to let Larry go? Okay, Larry.
Hi, I'm Jim's phone a friend. I'm Larry Ling. I'm Chief of Staff for Savannah River Remediation. My boss is on the way over here, but I guess that's my problem for getting here early. But I just want to tie some of this together. The gentleman over there mentioned earlier about the National Defense Authorization Act of 2005, 3116, which authorizes the Secretary of Energy in consultation with the NRC to reclassify high-level waste or manage high-level waste as low-level waste. And the gentleman over here was asking about how you go about reclassifying it. The risk-based definition that we would go to is not any different than what we're doing now, closing tanks or producing saltstone. You have to meet 10 CFR 61, Part 55 in terms of performance objectives, which you ensure protection of the worker, protection of the general population, prevention of inadvertent intrusion once you lose institutional control, and stability of the final waste form. So there is a process to go about determining what the risk is to go through the classification process. So.
As we talk around the table about this, feasibility and the recommendation and everything, one of the things that stood out to me at the very beginning when this was put in committee, and it still stands out to me, we're the Savannah Riverside CAB, and we talk a lot about WIP, and we talk a lot about a geological repository, and we talk about Yucca Mountain. And now that stuff is like outside of us. This recommendation talks about stuff that we can do. It's possibly asking about what can we do at Savannah Riverside to help get this stuff out of here. And it isn't saying, well, if we had this or if we had that. This is something that we can do as a CAB and make a recommendation asking a feasibility. And I applaud David, because this is something that it's not saying, well, if we had a geological repository, this is what we do. Or if we had, can we do this? We're asking Department of Energy, can we do this to get some of this stuff out of here? And we're not asking for WIP, and we're not asking for Yucca Mountain. We're asking, can we do this? And I think that's a great thing for us to concentrate on. Stuff that can we do it here at Savannah Riverside? And Tom, I liked what you brought up. It won't fit into the envelope. Well, and I like what Dan said. They're going to have to figure that out. So, I wholeheartedly think this is a great recommendation, just because it's about us. It's not about other people. This is about Savannah Riverside. So, that's it.
Great point, Gil. Thank you. Jim, I'm going to let him. He's had his card up for a while, and then we'll come over to Tom. And then if no more cards go up.
Then just send it forward and let them answer the question. And it may just boil down to what Department of Energy wants to do. And,
You know, if they have the authority to reclassify, they may have a reason for not reclassifying, or they may have a reason to classify in the manner you speak. So let's just see.
Tom.
So Tom French, Cab, my only concern is this is predicated on cost savings. And if you look at the infrastructure investment and what you have to get built, designed, do your risk analysis, which are not cheap, any cost savings would go away instantly. So that was my only point.
Okay, I got you.
Is that it from our board members? Yeah, Dan.
Just kind of on the subject of cost savings, it's a cascading effect, because if we are effective of getting some of these canisters out, let's say, if we get enough of them out, we don't need a glass waste storage building expansion. And that could potentially save dozens of millions of dollars later. And it's, as Gil eloquently put, it's in our purview of what can we physically do to help Savannah River Site meet its EM mission and get rid of some of this stuff.
Okay. Jack.
Jack Craig, DOE. I was only going to add that this subject's been under discussion between the department and other outside entities for at least since I've been at Savannah River for the last 3 years, even longer than that. So you may want to take a look at the ECA, Energy Communities Alliance, has sent the department a letter within the last year on the exact same subject, asking to look. In fact, they may have even gone a step further of supporting the reclassification. But I think I'm not in a position to respond to that letter today, but I know the same questions have been asked, and there are actions underway to respond to that letter. Energy Communities Alliance. They are communities that are representative of all the major sites in the Department of Energy. And the Savannah River Reuse Organization, Rick McLeod is the executive, they're a member of that alliance. Thanks.
All right. Any further questions, comments, concerns, points you want to make, statements about the recommendation, statements of support?
I make a motion that we move it till tomorrow to vote on.
We will vote on it tomorrow. Okay. Is there any other discussion that we need to have before we move into public comment?
Because we won't have the discussion tomorrow, right? This is our discussion time.
This is your discussion time. Yeah, tomorrow we're just really going to be about voting for it. So if you've got a point to make, Don's right. Let's make it now. This is your time to affect hearts, minds, souls, beliefs. Okay. All right. So no one has signed up for public comment, but we do have 15 minutes set aside. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Yes, sir. Please do.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Mara, the Executive Director of Citizens for Nuclear Technology Awareness in Aiken, South Carolina, and I just would like to make one comment on the discussion we just had, and I think Jack said it real well, that it has been looked at for some time, but I'd like to also bring an international perspective to this for you guys to consider. I do a lot of consulting work with the International Atomic Energy Agency on waste management, and one thing that always comes to the top of the heap when we discuss these kind of matters is, as far as I know, the U.S. is the only country in the world that does and classifies their waste on a source-based method. Everyone else typically does it or always does it on risk-based. So when we discuss this, it's sometimes difficult to try to get the system across to many other countries about how we classify our waste and what our waste what high-level waste really means in the U.S. So it is something to consider, and I think this is a great start, and I know that it's been discussed for several years, but if we want to look at the rest of the world and how they do their business, I think that's probably worthwhile to consider too. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other further public comments? All right, seeing none. You guys have blown through today's agenda. It is 2 hours early, so before I set you free, does anybody just want to sit here for a while? Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you want to discuss? Maybe we touched on some items earlier today that we want to circle back around on. No, everyone saw the sun, everyone saw the beach. Dan, yes.
I was just kind of noting, trying to capture name cards and a couple faces missing that we don't know about, and just kind of a, would it be plausible to have maybe a roll call somewhere in the early stages of the meeting that shows, should I be expecting to see Eric? Is he MIA? Is he excused? Is he coming? Is he not coming? I'm sorry to pick on Eric. No, that wasn't the point. But I was just noticing someone's picture here, and I don't see her here, and I don't see her name card. So just, do we have enough members? I mean, it's obviously we do for a quorum. That's not the issue. But
right.
Just speaking to not really the elephant in the room, but just the obvious by their, or inconspicuous by their absence.
Sure. And if that's something that you guys want to do, we could take a look at building something in. We definitely want to hear from more CAB members before we did that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Susan.
This is Susan Corbett, CAB. I don't know whether you can tell us this, but I'd like to know why David Hoyle was asked to step down.
Michael, I'm going to ask you to deal with that one.
Sure. Michael McAlance, DOE. When David joined the CAB, he was retired, and then sometime after that, he went back to work, chose to go to work for a subcontractor or operating contractor. Last summer, we found this out at the last meeting up in Augusta. Last summer, David's job was in the subcontract was picked up by SRS. What that means is SRS chose to take the functions that David was performing as a subcontractor and made it part of the M&O operation. What David was not aware of at the time that happened is that DOE has an order on that's applicable to all advisory committees. And that order specifically prohibits any representative of an operating contractor from being a member of an advisory board, any advisory board. I have a lot of discretion, Jim Folk and I do, as the DDFOs, to weigh through conflict of interest issues. When a directive says, no, I don't have that prerogative anymore. So we pointed that out to David, asked David to what he intended to do, and he's, as everybody knows, he's been a very big advocate of following the procedures and following the rules. And at that meeting, he indicated that he would resign.
So maybe I understand this. So that only applies to subcontractors?
No, it applies to operating contractors, prime contractors to DOE, which would be, in this case, SRS and SRR.
Okay.
As an employee of SRS, he has an inherent conflict of interest that the directive says will not be allowed.
And can you explain what the contract?
No, I can't, because the order doesn't explain it. The secretary, when he put the order in place, said operating contractor representatives shall not participate in advisory boards. It does not explain why, and I'm not going to speculate. It's just extremely clear in the directive. If you wish, I have it after. I can show it to you after the break.
So do we have any other members here that work for subcontractors?
Not subcontractors, prime contractors.
Okay.
He was a
do
prime,
we have any
no.
other members here that work for
no,
prime
you do
contractors?
Not. Or they wouldn't be on the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob.
Bob Dorcab. Tomorrow, Eleanor, the Administrative and Outreach, you're going to conduct elections for the CAB chairs, the issues-based chairs. So I saw a absentee ballot with, you had coverage, I'm going to call it coverage, for each one of the committees. You had at least one person who is chosen. I'm just going to ask at this point, if is there anybody else? I mean, is it not too late to nominate yourself to be a CAB chair?
slot because write-ins are fun.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I'm gonna, having done
They
this.
are. You never know what might come out from a write-in. It's awesome.
No, having done this, being the chair of an issues-based committee, I think it's very rewarding. I think it's a lot of fun, and I rely on the committee people. It's not just I'm the chair and what I say goes. It's really a good thing to get involved in, and it's okay to have multiple people running for a chair position. Obviously only one person is going to get picked, but then of course you need vice chairs as well as chairs. And I know in my case, David Hoyle last year, Gil Allsworth was the vice chair one year, and he filled in for me more than once. And then David Hoyle was the vice chair this year, and then he had to fill in for me more than once. So it's not just getting a chair, but also getting a vice chair. So don't.
Sure, and that's a great point, Bob, because if you maybe didn't feel like you were ready to take on the chair role, but you're interested in being a vice chair, just keep in mind that vice chairs are not elected by the board. They are selected by the committee chair. So if you feel like that's something that you may want to do, make it known. Let the committee chair know before they just go off and pick somebody. Let them know that you're interested in that topic and that's something that you want to do. Don't keep it to yourself. Okay.
Eleanor Hopson, Administrative and Outreach Committee Chair. Thanks for the pitch, Bob. We needed that. Also, there will be, I'm quite sure, new committee chairs, but we need members of the committees as well, being that some of the members are now retiring from our CAB. We need to replace them with new members. Anyone wishing to be a chair, of course, you have the ability to write in on the ballot, or if you would like to write someone in on the ballot, there is a space for that. Are there other questions concerning the chair voting?
Right. Any questions or comments on anything else? I'm hoping. Let's Phil. No? Okay. Bob, did you have anything else? Just making sure. All right, Nina. Let's close it out for the day.
Thank you so much. And tomorrow it's 9 a.m.? 9 a.m. same room. And Eleanor, where is the the Admin and Outreach Committee is going to be where?
Probably in this room if there is a room reserved.
We'll just everybody will do it now. Over there.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Are we doing it now or 5?
Let's do it in 5 minutes. Okay. Take 5 or 10 minutes and meet up over there.